Hello and welcome to the first official full episode of All of Us Are Lost, a podcast which is looking back over Lost, the TV series, 20 years on. I am Kat Hughes and I am joined by my co-host.
Hi, I'm Andy Connor. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about the pilot episode, both part one and two, because it just feels silly to separate them. So, Andy, can you talk about, your first experience with the pilot?
Personally, I think I came quite late to Lost. I think it wasn't. I remember the trailers and the kind of build up. Obviously, the trailer which the show's named after that was on Channel 4 that we kind of discussed briefly in the our trailer episode. And there was the hype, there was the posters, but I was quite late to it. I think I was maybe half a series in at least before I kind of came on board with it. I just remember, so at that time as well, I had just developed a terrible fear of flying, so I also avoided it. It's just
Right.
still stuck with me to this day, unfortunately. But yeah, I remember just the kind of scope and the size and watching it for the first time, and then it was a case of now I'm hooked. I have to watch Pilot Part 2 and then moving on, kind of getting diving deep into the mysteries as it was going on. But yeah, it was quite uh, an enlightening experience, I think, at the time. What about yourself? Was it something that you caught straight away?
Yeah, I was one of those people that got completely hooked by all of the two posters. I think there were spreads in Heat magazine, that promo constantly cycling on Channel 4. So yeah, I think it was on at like 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night on Channel 4. So me and my mum were like, "What's this new program? Let's sit down and watch it." And by the end of it, the we still didn't know what the program was, but we were definitely going to be coming back the next week and from there on in. So yeah, I think it's as pilots go, I think it's one of the strongest out there in terms of like hooking the viewer in for coming back.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think as you said, we're going to discuss Pilot Part 1 and 2. They are of they're classed as almost like one episode, but they're very different in the way they set things up. And I think it's really interesting that they chose to do that off of, pilots could be picked up or dropped by these major US TV companies, and the fact that they committed to that two episodes at the start as well is really interesting. Like I read somewhere that the executive that greenlit it got fired because the amount of money it cost for the ABC, and then it led on to becoming their most successful TV show ever at the
Mm.
time. But yeah, it's really interesting how they kind of committed to that so early on.
Yeah. And that opening, like the opening first like 10 minutes is,
Mm,
I mean, it wouldn't be out of place in any big action blockbuster. I mean, that's
mm,
a lot of money. We've got, a jet engine on fire. There's people being sucked into jet engines. There's
mm,
explosions. There's people screaming on the beach. You don't expect a TV show to come out, straight out the bat going that hard.
mm. And yeah, and especially if I was personally, see if I was on that island and my plane had just crashed and I'd been one of the lucky 48, I think it was, that survived, I would have been moving as far away from that plane as possible. They all seem to have kind of huddled around it. It could be shock, maybe, I suppose. But the first thing I'd be doing is far away up the beach. Like, no way you're hanging around that. That'd have been terrifying, especially if part of the wing's hanging off. Like, and as you said, the jet engine's still running. Some unfortunate guy dies because he can't hear what someone's shouting to him because he's standing next to a fully functioning jet engine, which was quite comical in its own way. Yeah, it's really, it does hook you in straight away. You get the focus on certain characters. Obviously, the knight in shining armor, it seems to be at the start is Jack, and the way the kind of character development so early on in this as well, I think it's really it is one of the strongest parts certainly of the show overall as a whole. Thinking back to it,
Yeah. I like to think when I sort of was watching it back that, I'd be like a Jack or, maybe a Boone, sort of trying to help, but not kind of doing that. But I think in all honesty, I'm Shannon and I'm stood just there screaming my head off at what is happening.
Yeah, yeah. I would probably, I'd maybe go, I think maybe Hurley, because Hurley, oh, this is more into pilot part two, but it doesn't. It's not very useful. He shows himself in a kind of kind manner by providing food for Claire, but he's just kind of wandering about, and Jack tells Hurley to move Claire away from underneath the partially collapsed wing. Goes away, turns round, Hurley's still sitting there with her, and then the wing's collapsing. So yeah, a bit kind of meandering and cumbersome. I think that would probably be my reaction. Although again, probably just relief that you're alive as well, that you're not even thinking about potentially dying in another horrible accident.
Yeah, during this rewatch, I did kind of like jot down kind of the order in which we see the people who will go on to be sort of main players,
Mm,
which I thought was quite interesting. So obviously the first person we see is Jack, and then we see Vincent the dog.
mm,
Um, and then you see Charlie. Charlie's kind of stumbling around near the jet engine, but we don't get any words from him. And then you hear like Jin shouting for Sun and Michael shouting for Walt. And you've got Shannon screaming. And then our first glimpse at John Locke is he's one of the people that helps Jack get the marshal that like lifts him out. So
yeah,
again, we're not hearing anything from him. And then we see Claire, and then while Jack's stealing to the heavily pregnant Claire, he sees Boone basically trying to kill Rose under the guise of helping her because apparently he's a fully certified lifeguard who doesn't know how to do CPR.
yeah.
And then, yes, then we get Hurley. We don't see Kate until a little bit later on, and we don't see Sawyer, Walt, Sun, or Saeed either, which I think is quite interesting. Sort of like when you know who your important people are, looking back,
Mm,
sort of spotting them. I assumed that we would see everybody and like everybody would like get a line or something, but no, the only people that are afforded the lines are Jack, Claire, Hurley, and Boone, which I thought was quite interesting.
hmm Yeah, and as you said, they kind of develop later, don't they? And you, coming at it from the aspect that we're watching it, we know the type of people they become and how important their role is and everything. Um, you, I remember when we were speaking in the trailer ep about the Jin and Sun relationship. It's interesting that there is a early doors, early on. There is quite you see that toxic relationship already starting to form, isn't it? That's really it's bubbling under from what we're going to be coming up against.
Yeah, she's on a desert island and she's wearing a cardigan and she's undone one button, but that's no, he's not like that's not ladylike. She's got to button that button up, she's got to keep it up, and she's got to do whatever he says. She's got to be wherever he is. She's very much his possession. I assume in his mind it's he's being the protector, he's the husband, he's looking out for her, but it definitely does not come across like that at all. It comes across as very possessive. And you
Mm.
get the impression that although nobody else speaks Korean, they all kind of know to give this couple a wide berth because he's not treating her the best.
Yeah, I did have an element of sympathy for him though when he is trying to feed everyone. I think he's feeding them sea urchin, and he's
Yes.
obviously there is the language barrier, but he's just telling people, "Come on, have something to eat. Like this will help you." And they're just like, "Oh no, I'm not eating that." You can't really be picky, can you? Like
Yeah,
I
but
suppose
that's
Shannon,
Americans, isn't it? That's
yeah, yeah, like Shannon's refusing to eat a chocolate bar that Boone offers her, which yeah, it's there is that element. I felt a kind of bit sorry for him, but there's obviously the undercurrent of the control and everything that he's got. But aye, it's just the fact that it as well. It's only a 42, 43 minute episode, and it does grip you, but it also gives you enough time, I think, with everyone to keep your interest peaked in all of those individual characters. Like you said, we get a kind of glimpse of Charlie, who as the episode goes on, does become more kind of forward, and he has his own reasons for why he's wanting to join uh, Jack and Kate on the expedition to the fuselage of the plane at the front of the plane. But they are all given enough time to kind of mingle and get that feel for them. Oh, get that feel for them as people. Even Locke, you don't hear from him, but there's just a strangeness about him. Is it that? Is it in episode
Yeah,
one where he goes the orange? Is that pilot one where someone's looking at him and he smiles with the orange over his teeth?
it's Kate, isn't it? Kate looks at him before she goes on to one of the expeditions,
Yeah, I
and
don't know what that
yeah,
is.
and this Kate's just like, who is this weirdo? Which I think it would be the reaction to, yeah, it's already a strange enough island. We don't need people doing shit like that.
Exactly. Um, the it does kind of, as we did say there, it does set up that Jack is the go to guy, um, and he's trying to, obviously he's a doctor, so he's trying to lead people and trying to help people and act as a kind of beacon for all them, that they can trust him, they can go to him, and straight away Kate is taken on board by, he wants to find a transceiver on at the front of the plane, so they go and have a look for the the, the front of the plane. And how do you, without obviously, we don't know what's coming technically, do you think that the whole Kate and Jack thing is sold well early on?
I think it definitely, like their first introduction to each other, Jack's gone for sort of like he's made sure everybody on the beach is safe, and now he needs to sort his own injury out, which he's obviously known about for a while. And then Kate walks into the scene, and he immediately says, "Please help, stitch me back." It's like, "Have you done any sewing?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm like made my curtains." And he's like, "Cool, yeah, you can stitch me up." And she's like, with a sewing machine. It's like, yeah, no, it's the same. No, it's not the same. You
Yeah.
know, using a needle and thread is very different to sitting behind a sewing machine. But I think immediately there is that sort of intimacy and closeness between them, and I think audiences, are so used to at some point there's going to be some sort of like romance within any TV series, or will they, won't they? This is coming like post Ross and Rachel, uh, you know,
Mhm.
Joey and Pacey and all that stuff. So I kind of think that within that first scene, it quite obviously sets them up, and then they're always around. I do think like in Neighbours, um, I have this thing where there will be a lot of Neighbours chat probably throughout the series. I do apologize, but when a new character is introduced, they will have some sort of like encounter or fallout or whatever with another character, and inevitably that will be their end game character. So I always kind of like to watch programs through that sort of like neighbors gaze, and I kind of feel like they, right from this first scene, they are setting up Jack and Kate as sort of like potential love interests.
Mhm. And then before obviously they go out on their expedition, we hear something for the first night. In the rainforest, the jungle, not the rainforest, the jungle. We see trees getting shaken, things falling over, and like a guttural roar and clicking noises. And it's really, again, everyone on the island, they've just they've had a bad day enough as it is, and they don't know what this is. Um, I can remember at the time, again, theories right from really early on about what this was. Did you have any kind of thoughts or inclination towards that, or maybe not this early? I suppose that's quite difficult to say, but you go dinosaurs or something, don't you? Or gorillas or like King Kong.
Yeah, my mum's default is always aliens. It's always aliens. Whenever we're watching anything remotely weird or sci-fi, it's aliens. And I don't think her opinion changed for a long time. Strange thing in the woods, aliens. Polar bears in the woods, an alien put it there. So I think at the time I was probably distracted by my mum just saying it's aliens. There's aliens. It's going to be aliens somewhere. Um, but it's definitely intriguing, and it
Mm,
sets up that this isn't just like a castaway drama. This is gonna have some other elements to it. It's gonna have a bit of horror, maybe some sci-fi, and that I think that's what kind of hooked me, quite like it's like with Yellow Jackets recently, you kind of want to explore that mystery and like the characters.
mm, yeah. Aye, and as you said, it adds another layer. They've already tried their best to survive. They're waiting, or Shannon thinks the rescue's going to come soon, and then they've potentially got another kind of threat hiding away in the bushes. Um, Kate's the one that says, I think it's Kate says, "Why do you think we'd be any safer on the beach from that thing that's in there?" Which is a very
Yeah.
reasonable thing to say. And then we get the expedition, and we again get the an encounter with whatever it is at this moment in time. We hear the noises, we have a chase scene through the woods, and it's when we come to find the front of the plane. They see the pilot, one of the pilots has survived, played by the director of this episode, J.J. Abrams, a good friend, Greg Grunberg. I can never say that properly. But, and he's he essentially becomes the first victim of whatever it is
Mm.
that's chasing them in the forest. Quite a brutal scene. I can't remember it being as gory as that, like splash of blood horror like on the kind of windscreen of the airplane.
Yeah, it's the old sort of like Alien 3 thing, isn't it? Where it gets sort of like sucked
Mm-hmm.
up and then it's just the blood that spatters down afterwards. And again, 'cause the
Mm.
audience doesn't really see anything. The characters claim to have seen something. They're talking about, did you see it? It was big, it was much with it, but we haven't necessarily seen what's going on. So again, it adds that like intrigue of, well, what is this thing? And how has it done that to this person in like a second?
Yeah, aye. And um, a fact that I read before coming on tonight was that the character of Jack in the original kind of writing for it was supposed to die in part one of the pilot, but so, and I think they had initially were going to have him be a pilot who survived. Obviously, pilot,
Right.
pilot. I'm sure they meant that. And then, but have him be killed at some point. But then, as the writing progressed, he became a kind of recurring character. It was initially supposed to be played by Michael Keaton, but
Yeah.
he passed on it when the character of Jack became recurring. He just wanted a kind of one and done. Probably just wanted a holiday in Hawaii. Um, and
Yeah.
then opted against it when that kind of changed. I would do that for a
I
holiday
mean,
in
I
Hawaii.
guess he could have been the pilot, but
Mm,
then we wouldn't have had Greg Grunberg, who is our first sort of entry into the life after Lost sort of
mm,
thread that's going to be running. So he wasn't particularly known before this. I mean, he's not a particularly big character in this, but
yep,
then 2 years later, he was cast in Tim Kring's Heroes as Matt Parkman, like the detective who was he psychic or something? I forget what his power was, but
yeah,
he was one of the people with powers, and he was a prominent character across like all of the seasons, and I think he even came back for like some of the spin-off stuff as well. And then he became like really good friends with J.J. Abrams and has been in kind of just everything that Abrams has done since, Super 8, Star Trek, I think outside of Abrams, he was in Castle Rock for a couple of episodes,
oh,
and I think most recently he did The Fablemans. So, and he was in an episode of The Boys. I think he's only in like a scene or something, but he's become one of those like that guys that you're like, oh, it's that dude. But I don't necessarily remember him as being in Lost. So even though this is kind of like one of his early things, it's still watching it back. It's like, oh, it's him. It's him from Heroes. But I think it's quite interesting that even people with small roles, just being a part of Lost, and particularly that pilot of Lost, managed to open doors for everybody.
mm. And it's like a when you mentioned Heroes there, and but we're obviously discussing Lost, another kind of controversial show. He picks his moments, doesn't he? Like, Heroes is
Yeah,
one that fell off a cliff. literally, from what I can remember. I don't think I ever saw the last series, which I think was in a carnival or something like that, maybe. I
Oh, it
can't
was
remember.
so bad. So bad.
Yeah, yeah, I think Writer's Strike absolutely put paid to that when it happened. Um, so, yeah, I mean, he is exactly that type of actor. There's so many, like, character actors that you go, I've seen him in something. And you go back and you check over, like you look at their IMDb, or you firstly you find out their name because they're never obviously they're not
Yes.
front
Yes.
and center. Like you need to scroll through the credits, and yeah, he's probably the most prominent that guy that I think we've had in the past 20 years anyway. Just because of how
Mm.
successful JJ Abrams has become. Um, did he play a red shirt in Star Trek? He strikes me as he'd be a red shirt in Star Trek. If not, that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, probably. And he's done like voice work in Abrams stuff. Is yeah,
Mm,
just he's always there. I mean, I like it when actors and directors have this sort of bond. It's like Ryan Johnson and Noah Sagan. Like he always
mm,
sneaks Noah Sagan into his work. He's obviously front and center in Brick and Looper and Knives Out. And then they brought him back for Knives Out too, which is hilarious because he's playing a different character. But even in Star Wars, when Ryan Johnson did the big Star Wars, he got Noah Sagan in just as like one of the oh God, the X-wing fighters. I don't know Star Wars.
mhm.
But he's like featured for about like 30 seconds or something. I like it when actors and directors have that relationship, and it's like, you know what? I'm just going to give you a little bit of a boost so you can say that you're in a Star Wars film, and that's obviously
Mm,
what JJ has done with Greg too.
yeah. And again, holiday in Hawaii, maybe even got paid for it. You never know.
Yeah,
They were throwing money about in that pilot, so hopefully
it's
some of it
true.
ended in Greg Grunberg's pocket. Poor guy. Um,
Exactly.
so we've got to the point now, and they've got the transceiver, and we get introduced fully to the characters Saeed and Sawyer. Um,
Yeah.
they are we've seen them about, but now we're fully getting to know them. We're also getting to know Hurley a bit more.
Mm.
Through interactions just with everyone. He seems to be dotting about, jumping between Jack, and he's with Side, who's trying to fix the transceiver, which leads to a really kind of interesting, comical conversation between those two. What part of the army were you in? And it was like the Royal. Did you say the Royal Guard? I can't remember his exact
Yeah.
name for it.
Yeah.
Um,
Basically the enemy.
yeah, yeah, the guys who probably tried to kill your friends when they were fighting me, but that's fine. But Hurley's, I think overall, thinking back, Hurley is probably my favourite character because he does have emotional weight in it, but he's also really funny as well, and it's good seeing him this early on be so prominent. I think.
Mm. And Hurley's this great sort of conduit for the audience because right from his first scene, he's asking the questions that we want to ask. Jack, we've seen Jack for the first few minutes, and then he barks orders at Hurley, and then Hurley goes, "What's your name?" And it's like it's what the audience is thinking, like, who is this guy? Who are we following? And that's how we learn his name is Jack. And then kind of throughout, this first kind of like two episodes, he's going up to people and he's asking the questions, how far along are you, Claire? How pregnant are you? Are you okay? Saeed, can I help you? Where were you? Oh, you were in the army. So were my friends. Like he is the person that's kind of bringing that information out for the audience. And I kind of feel like without Hurley, we would all just be sitting there going, I don't understand anything or anybody in this program.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely, and he gives you that, as you said, as the conduit, and he gives you the oh god, taking a blank for the word. The I'll forget it. I'll move on because I can't remember the word, and it doesn't make for good viewing. Me sitting thinking about things. Um, it's also interesting the way Sawyer gets set up at this point as well. Saeed's accusing him of being racist, and Sawyer's just clearly a guy who seems to be a bit of a loose cannon. And I think Josh Holloway, another guy actually, who after this, I think I've only ever seen him in one Mission Impossible movie. He's in one of them for the
Hmm.
opening, and it might be Ghost Protocol, maybe Fallout. I can't remember. Maybe the
I
one in
think it's
between that.
protocol. Yeah, he's like one of the other agents, isn't he, at the beginning? Yeah. He's
Yeah.
like, he's done a lot of other like TV series, but none of them have captured the imagination in the same way. I think he was in one. which my mum obviously watched because it was aliens, an alien invasion one, called like Sanctuary or something,
Right.
with Sarah Wayne Callis, I think her name is, from The Walking Dead, who played Rick's wife,
Oh, okay.
Laurie. It's
Right.
like aliens aliens have like taken control and people are segregated and they've been separated from like one of their children or something. It like, we tried to watch the first like season, but then we just got a bit bored with it. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
when Sawyer comes in, uh, you can instantly tell he's going to be one of the main players, and he's a great antithesis to Jack.
Mm,
We've had Jack set up as the hero, and now you've got Sawyer set up as the villain. It's almost like cowboy sort of thing, the guy in white and the guy in black, and Sawyer's definitely embracing that villainous side, even though nobody knows who he is at this point.
mm. And you mentioned there the guy in the white and guy in black, and I think this is the first time we hear John Locke speaking as
Mhm.
he's talking to Walt, who has just approached him because he's sitting playing backgammon, I think, or checkers, backgammon, because it's more complex. He was saying, um, and he says one is light, one is dark. They're fighting against each other. Massive foreshadowing from a particularly
Yeah.
ominous guy for what's to come and his role in it as well as it kind of goes on. Really, Terry O'Quinn, I think, is great in this as well, and he gives you enough to have you interested about him, but also be wary of him at that point.
Mm. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
when you watch that scene for the first time, you just like, okay, there's this man telling this kids this thing. But on a rewatch, his discussion about that game, and then he said, it was these like he's going on about being before Christ, and there being these men locked in a battle before Christ, and that there's one in black. And as you're rewatching it, it's suddenly like, oh, so they were like signposting some aspects of this program right from the very first episode. Like this, I think a lot of people kind of said, like, as the program went on, they were just making it up as they go along. But when you look at a scene like that, well, they clearly weren't.
mm, yeah, and the shadows, the clouds are gathering in the background as well as he's discussing it. Um, it's just really interesting, proper introduction to that character. We did see him acting weird earlier on, but without getting any sort of delve into his psyche. Um, the This is now the second expedition. Yeah, so Side fixes the transceiver, and now they have to get up high to try and get a signal, basically. And after what's in the forest in the first episode, the next sort of mystery that gets dropped at our feet is Sawyer kills a polar bear, and it's comes from nowhere, and Sawyer also gets a gun from nowhere, and it's just again there's all these things. It's very front loaded with what's going to come later on, and I can kind of understand why people maybe thought they didn't know what they were writing because there's so much just in these first
Mm,
two episodes, and having a polar bear on a desert island, tropical island in the middle of nowhere, just off what we think is just off of Australia somewhere, um, is it again hooks you straight in, and he killed it as well. It's just a bit of a shame, and they didn't eat it. Yeah, I
yeah.
can't remember if they
Well,
do.
they're not. I mean, yeah. I mean, Shannon's not eating chocolate, so they're definitely not at polar bear level just yet. So
Mm,
it's,
no,
but that is a waste of meat, and it's a waste of fur, and there's lots of resources that they could have from that. You know, it's
mm.
yeah, it's a shame. But again, aliens dropped it there, or I mean, could it have been on the plane going to a zoo, or would that be like a private plane? It's all these questions you sort of start asking yourself, like, how would a polar bear end up on this island?
Could have floated there on an iceberg because of global warming, but which wouldn't have been as bad
Exactly.
back then. So the ice would have melted slower as it's going through the ocean, and then just falls on the island, and that's what happens. It's just that's the
Exactly.
obvious explanation. It's the
Yeah,
exact way to go.
exactly. Yeah.
um,
And then I think I was gonna say, in this instance as well, like, obviously, Charlie has been present on both expeditions like
Mm,
Kate, and whereas Kate seems to be more open to keeping sort of secrets and, not causing fear amongst anybody by saying, there was this thing in the woods. Charlie's quite open and saying, yeah, you see that thing? There's something much worse, and we're walking towards it. Um,
mm,
which is like, if Hurley is the audience going, answering the audience's questions, Charlie is kind of like the doomsayer who is just, constantly mentioning how bad everything is.
mm. And Kate and Charlie, again, very prominent early on, and we get three lots of flashbacks. I think in the first two episodes, we get Jack, who's just fairly basic. He's well, it shows that he maybe has potentially has an alcohol problem, but
Mm.
it's nothing too mysterious. Charlie bumps into him. Charlie's one turns out that he's a heroin addict who has also been smuggling heroin on the flight, which is the reason for him going to the cockpit in the first place to get his dope. And there is a kind of shorter mystery as to there's an FBI agent on the plane who's been carrying a passenger to go back to the US for some sort of crime, and we find out in this that it's Kate. Um, Apparently, I've missed it. I need to go back and look. Because the first time you see Kate, she's rubbing her arms, rubbing her wrists.
Yes,
And
yeah.
she meets
Yeah.
Jack, yeah, because she's taking off her handcuffs, and again, it just adds. There's layers upon layers getting added to this as you're going, and the flashbacks really add to it. It's not something that was regularly used before that I can remember. It's certainly been used since, but to get that level of storytelling is really interesting way to do it.
Yeah, because it's little flashes, it's little snippets, and yeah, it goes on to become Lost's thing,
Mm.
which, yeah, other series try to replicate. I mean, I think the biggest one that I can remember is the Arrow TV series. They loved flashing back to Oliver Queen's life. They really loved that.
Yeah.
They took that Lost model and ruined it quite a lot.
Mm. Yeah. I think the Kate thing as well, for some reason in my head, it happened a lot later on in the show. I
Yeah.
thought there was a whole thing, but she's shown as being getting this kind of taken in custody on the flight, but also her first when the plane's going down, her first action is to try and help the agent who's arrested her. So it shows that she's not just a bad guy, as you might think.
Mm.
There's more to her than kind of meets the eye. Although the agent's got a bit of a problem. If you wake up because your plane's crashed and you get a bit of shrapnel sticking out your chest, and your first thought is, "Where is she?" He's got to go over that a bit, can't he? Priorities first and foremost. Like you're not going to take her to jail. There's no jail. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's a very angry man, and but again,
mm,
that's another mystery. It's like, what has she done that she is the absolute first thing that he is concerned about? Like, to me, if that's your first thought in that circumstance, she must have done something pretty heinous to warrant that response. So it's yet another like mystery. Like, okay, we've instantly been revealed that she was the one in the handcuffs, but we don't know why at this point. But from his reaction, it must be something pretty bad.
mm. And there's an element to the kind of Charlie mystery as well, which I wondered, and I wonder if it's just been an oversight. Again, it might get explained later. So he, at the time of the crash, is at the front of the plane in the toilet. Is that right? No, he goes to the front of the plane at the toilet. It starts out in a really bad turbulence because he hits the roof in the toilet, and then he just
Yeah.
goes to the kind of first seat that he can get to, I think. But then he would have been at the front of the plane. I don't know if that's something that comes later on. Maybe it does. I can't remember. But
No.
if he was at the front of the plane, then yeah, maybe again it could just be writing errors or pilot stuff that they've just kind of glossed over at the time. But I noticed that this sort of first time.
Yeah. I mean, if it is something that gets overlooked, it's it's not the worst crime a pilot's committed. You know, the amount of times when suddenly a character is played by a completely different person, we're all just supposed to get on board as though that wasn't played by somebody different previously.
Yeah,
But I like the reveal of Charlie because I say I was one of these people that was brought in by the advertising and the you know the promo that's kind of inspired the name of this is it's kind of like a confessional on the beach and it's like one of us is a hero, one of us is a fraud. So like as I was kind of watching it, I was like, okay, so who's who? And here, you know, by the end of the first two episodes, we've got one of us is a junkie, literally.
yeah,
So I kind of like that it's already kind of addressing that because just that promo is its own other mystery. It was like a little tease of, you know, someone's a cop, someone's a sinner, someone's a martyr, someone's a murderer. So it's like, oh, who is everybody? And the fact that we kind of already know one of them, it's like, okay, so now who's all the rest of them? Which I
mm,
always thought was quite interesting.
yeah. And that trailer, you've got Locke as the conductor as well, which is a really interesting snippet for him. What's to come for him? This is then our second cliffhanger within one pilot but two episodes, um, where Side manages to get a signal of sorts because they get to a decent height and an open clearing. And but if it turns out his signal's been blocked because there's something else on the island broadcasting, a French signal. I remembered nothing about this from first watch, and they use Shannon because she can briefly speak French, but basically it says, "I am alone now on the island alone. Please, someone come. The others, they're dead. It killed them. It killed them all." And Side works out that that's been playing for 16 years, which is not a good sign.
No, no. And add to that the information from the pilot, which was like they had to go off course. They weren't able to let anybody know. Like nobody knows where to look for them. They're now on this island where there's a signal from 16 years ago. Like they're not going to get rescued anytime soon. You know, what are they going to do? Where are they? And who is this French woman? Is she still around? You know, it's been 16 years, but you know,
Mm,
what Tom Hanks survived for a while on a little beach with a beach ball, you know, there's obviously food and stuff available in the forest. So it's
yeah.
this whole extra thing of this, you know, who else is out there? Is there anybody else out there? Yeah, just so many mysteries packed into what in total is what an hour and 20 minutes.
Mm, yeah. So it's again that came quite as a surprise to me. Could not remember anything about it, but it shows that they obviously had. I suppose with pilots, you can sometimes see that they are episodes in themselves. With some TV shows, they do wrap up maybe like a, a mini story within them to get people hooked to then develop the story further. But the creators and J.J. Abrams were so confident in this that they were happy just to have so many cliffhangers, so many mysteries within, as you said, an hour and 20 or whatever it was. And we've had polar bears already. We've had something in the woods. We've had a French woman that's been replaying a message from a French woman that's been replaying for 16 years. Flashbacks, deaths, all sorts happening. And as I said, the mystery of why they're there is kind of what is keeping us going, and it's so. I think it's so bold for the way that they've done this.
Mm. And I think the really exciting thing is as much as they've done all this, they haven't scrimped on you know the characters on interpersonal
Mm,
relationships. You know, we had the scene with Jack and Kate, but we find out a bit more about Walter and Michael, where like he's estranged father and son who are now kind of thrown together in the wake of the mother's passing, and there's that whole dynamic. There's obviously Jin and Son, Boone and Shannon, you know, sort of like brother and sister are just sort of at each other's throats. You can already tell that there's something else there. You've got Claire, who's, you know, this pregnant lady who's, you know, very concerned about her unborn child. And there are these, it does, amongst all of this other chaos, they do take the time to kind of hone in and actually make you care about these characters so that you do want to see where they go going forwards.
Mm. And the another piece of trivia: the comic book that Walt is reading is Green Lantern and the Flash Faster Friends #1, which has a polar bear in the strip. So they know what they're doing because they know someone's going to look that up. Or certainly, I didn't, but I'm sorry, I just an easy way and checked the trivia for the episodes. But they're not. JJ's not daft with leaving those breadcrumbs throughout. Um, so I think just a strong opener, a really strong 2 episodes, and can't wait to see what comes next. Obviously, episode 3. I don't actually have the name of that in front of me. I should have written that down. Have you got that there? It's just me.
I did know it, but I know that episode 4 is called Walkabout, which will be one of the 2 episodes that we talk about next time.
Mm,
So yeah,
we'll find that out. We'll get there. It's fine.
yeah, we'll
Um,
learn for next time.
yeah. So yeah, it's been really great getting to talk about this again from having the first time rewatch for me, and I can't wait to keep going. Really.
Yeah, just realizing, as it like with the scene with Locke and a couple of other moments, just how well thought through this was. Like I am very keen to kind of see how all the connective tissue just kind of like stitched together. And as I said in the intro, I think that watching it kind of in quick succession will give a very different outcome from viewing it over years and months with massive gaps, because this is a problem that's so intricate. You
Mm,
need to be remembering like what's just happened. So yeah, I think this is definitely, for those new to the program, it's definitely the way to watch it. I feel.
mm, yeah. Um, so just to wrap up, then I think you can find where can you find yourself, Kat, for all your socials, etc.
I am at Gizmo Shikari on Letterboxd, Twitter, Instagram. There's links to all of my writing that I do. I also have another podcast. If you haven't had enough of hearing me talk, Movies with Mummy with my 5-year-old. It's chaos, but people like it. So yeah, that is where you can find me and yourself, Andy.
Get me on Twitter at Nowhere Andy. That's pretty much the only thing that I'm on. I've got an Instagram. Couldn't tell you what it is. It might be at Nowhere Andy as well. I'm not 100% sure. Check it. See if it is. You might find me on that. But yeah, just at Nowhere Andy on there for any thoughts on this.
Yeah, and next time we will be doing a double build. So we will be talking about the third and fourth episodes, which I believe is when we get our first proper round of flashbacks where we start digging into like one specific character. So I'm quite looking forward to finding out who those characters are and what they've been hiding.
Mm. Yeah, look forward to that. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening on all good and rubbish podcast platforms. And we'll see you next time.